Good morning. The first service of worship in this church building took place on the 26th of October 1845, which means our people have been congregating in this meeting house for the past 175 years. However, our congregation goes back much further than 1845. Indeed, the congregation was founded in the year 1625. And I want to spend a short time this morning covering those early years and setting the historical context for the birth of Presbyterianism in Templepatrick. In compiling this work, I have used information gleaned from two books. First one, Templepatrick, 1619 to 1969, by the Reverend Stuart Adair. And the second one, Building Up a Church, by Sidney Colloch and Katie Orme. The information found in these books has been supplemented by widespread internet research. So let's start with those early years and how those first Presbyterians established a church presence here in Templepatrick. The plantation of Ulster, which officially began in 1609 during the reign of James I, encouraged and enabled the northern part of Ireland to be colonised by huge numbers of Scottish and English settlers. During this plantation period, much of the land was taken from the native Gaelic chieftains who had been defeated by the English at the end of a 9-year war and who eventually were forced to flee to France and thereafter to Italy. The land confiscated from them was distributed among senior English officers who had fought in the 9 Years' War, one of whom was Captain Humphrey Norton, who was given possession of the Knights Templar fortress in Templepatrick, which he converted into Castle Norton in 1611. It was in the above historical context that the first Presbyterian settlers arrived in Templepatrick in 1619, many of them becoming tenant farmers under the jurisdiction of Captain Norton. These early Presbyterians from Scotland were staunch in the Reformed faith, and having no meeting house in which to gather, they were allowed to use the Anglican Church, then situated in the grounds of Castle Norton. It was during this period that a young Presbyterian minister by the name of Josiah Welsh arrived in Ulster just as the 6 Mile Water religious revival was beginning in Oldstone near Antrim. Josiah came from sound Presbyterian stock, being the son of Elizabeth Knox, the youngest daughter of the famous Scottish reformer John Knox. His father was the Reverend John Welsh, a well-known minister in Ayr. On hearing of Josiah's spiritual commitment during the revival and being highly impressed, Captain Norton determined to have him minister in Templepatrick. The story goes that during a Sunday service in 1625, Captain Norton interrupted the service, ordered the curate, a Mr. Tracy, out of the pulpit, and installed Josiah Welsh as the first minister of Templepatrick Presbyterian Church. The installation of Josiah Welsh as minister was one of Captain Norton's final acts in Templepatrick, as later in 1625 the castle was sold to the Upton family and subsequently renamed Castle Upton. In a publication called Bible Hub, we read how Josiah settled into Templepatrick, where, quote, he with great vigilance and diligence exercised his office, which by blessing of God upon his labours gained him many seals of his ministry. Robert Blair, a minister from Bangor and the person who had originally invited Josiah to Ireland, wrote about the extremely long church services of the time and related, quote, the sermon exhausted the hourglass in the little church in Templepatrick. Special regard was given to communion, whereby for several days the people abstained from work and food by way of preparation for Communion Sunday. This would have been the precursor of our pre-communion service. Unfortunately, as time passed, the early good relations between the Presbyterians and the Anglicans became strained after Archbishop Laud of Canterbury determined to impose a uniformity of worship based on Anglican doctrine. Consequently, in May 1634, Josiah Welsh, along with other Scottish clergy, was deposed and could subsequently only minister to his huge flock in the open air. Sadly, this became too much for him. His health gave out, and he died of a fever on the 23rd of June, 1634. A friend, Mr. Livingstone, who tended to him along with Robert Blair, recalls his final earthly moments thus: "Very little before he died, being at prayer by his bedside, and the word victory coming out of my mouth, he took hold of my hand, and desiring of me to forbear a little, and clapping his hands, cried out, 'Victory, victory, victory for evermore.' Then he desired me to go, and a little thereafter he expired at the early age of 36 years. The Reverend Josiah Welsh was buried beside the mausoleum in the old burying ground of Castle Upton. A local historian, Dr. Stevenson, relates that the original memorial stone had a Latin inscription which read, "Here lies interred under this stone great Knox's grandchild and Welsh's son. Born in Scotland, brought up in France, he came to Ireland the gospel to advance." Just as Captain Norton can be seen to be the founder of Templepatrick, Josiah Welsh laid the foundation of Presbyterian doctrine and practice in this area. After Josiah's death, Presbyterianism had to lie dormant for over a decade because of the state's antagonistic policy towards the Scottish clergy. Furthermore, the early church in the grounds of Castle Norton, or Castle Upton, was destroyed by the native Irish in the 1641 Rising.